The Prime Minister has vowed to shelter British business from President Trump's tariffs.
Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, Sir Keir Starmer has reaffirmed his commitment to free and open trade and mounting pressure to respond.
Well, the Treasury is also set to announce a package of emergency measures as growth forecasts have taken that significant hit, cut 50% or so, you'll remember.
Yeah, and behind the scenes, diplomatic efforts are already underway, with the Prime Minister and the French President, Emmanuel Macron, both agreeing that a trade war is in nobody's interest.
But with tensions rising, so too are calls for Britain to forge closer ties with the EU. So, should we lean into Brussels or keep pushing for a UK-US trade deal?
Well, let's get the thoughts of political commentator Andy Williams, who joins us from Edinburgh. Andy, good morning. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And perhaps you'd like to begin by commenting on that last point, that are we looking at a way of perhaps getting much closer trade deals with the EU, while at the same time managing to placate Mr. Trump?
Well, it's a really difficult challenge. You know, Keir Starmer's trying to ride two horses at once, if you like. And placating Donald Trump is all about international diplomacy. It's about building that relationship and keeping him happy, which is not the easiest thing to do. On the other hand, we do need to rebuild our trading relationship with the European Union. Keir Starmer's right that nobody wins from a trade war. And actually, we have lost tens of billions of pounds worth of trade as a result of Brexit over the last 9 years. So we do need to rebuild those ties. And the other thing we need, and Keir Starmer says this in his piece for the Telegraph today, is a proper industrial strategy to rebuild domestic industry, because there's been so much offshoring over the last 10 years. We don't have that industry in this country, and we do need to rebuild it. But this is a very, very, very complex challenge to resolve.
Is he right when he says it's the end of the global world order? It is the end of globalisation as we know it. Well, on the whims of one man's decisions from the White House, Keir Starmer's happy to accept the end of globalisation?
Well, I don't think he's happy to accept it, but I think he's correct that for now, that is the end of the old liberal international order. Now, I don't think this is permanent. I really do believe that this is an aberration, a blip, and something that will change when somebody else enters the White House in 3.5, 4 years' time. But for now, it is over, and I'm afraid, and it is really unfortunate, because I personally think Donald Trump is a disaster.
I used to have to use the razor that my ex-girlfriend used to shave her legs. It scratched me and it made me feel weird. But fear not, because Manscaped is back with a game changer. This isn't just any old shaver. We're talking about the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver with two interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. One for that baby smooth look, and another when you want to keep it a bit rugged. Get this, it's waterproof. You can use it in the shower, by the pool, or even while scuba diving if that's your thing. This beauty runs for 75 minutes on a single charge. That's enough time to shave your face, your mate's face, and still have juice left over for touch-ups. You'll also get their Power Shave Gel for a proper wet shave experience, and a face shave soother to keep your mug looking fresh and irritation-free. It's like having a barber in your bathroom, minus the awkward small talk. Click the link in the description and use the code GBN for a whopping 20% off and free shipping with the code GBN at manscaped.com. Join the 11 million blokes worldwide who trust Manscaped. Your face will thank you, and so will your wallet.
I think he's a disaster for the economy. I think he's a disaster for the American people. But he is sufficiently powerful to make that much of a difference. So Starmer's right. He's living in the real world. For now, everything has changed and we have to respond accordingly.
Andy, I think there are people who think that Vance, who is the current vice president, it could also be a disaster. He is, after all, hewn out of a very similar political rock to the one that Trump comes from. But, I mean, if we are going to get rid of globalisation and produce more here in our own country, that takes time. You can't just throw up a factory overnight, can you? You can't just start to regenerate many of the businesses that we have lost because we've given them overseas, where, let's face it, usually the costs for employees were a lot cheaper, which is why America built its own massive wealth on doing precisely that, going to places where production costs were cheaper.
That's absolutely right. It will take time. And I don't think Keir Starmer or anyone is pretending anything else. It will take decades to rebuild that sort of industry. And unfortunately,
sorry to stop you, sweetie, but in the meantime, if we are building our own industry back in this country, what happens to the economics here in Britain? What happens to the money that people are taking home in their pay packets at the end of every month?
I think it's a tough message, but the reality is it's not going to be good. I mean, it is going to affect people. It is going to hurt the economy, and it is going to hurt people's pay packets. Growth will drop. We're probably going to have further tax rises, which nobody wants. And, people are really feeling the pain at the moment. I don't know what the solution is. You either have to invest in the NHS and get that performing better, or you're taxing businesses and people, and no one wants that. So it's a really awful situation. But you're right, Angela. Nobody can wave a magic wand.
Well, why don't we follow the method of going considerably lower welfare, considerably lower tax, start bringing people into the economy, start bringing people to this country to invest?
Well, I think that's a really good point. And firstly, I've said before with you, Stephen, that I don't agree with Labour's position on non-doms, for example. I don't think we should be driving wealthy people out of Britain. They pay huge amounts of money in tax. They invest in the economy. They spend money here. So I think we do need to be attracting wealthy people. We need to be attracting businesses and making sure that we have an environment that is healthy for businesses to grow. So we need to be doing all of that. But equally, we can't just go down the route of a massive tax cutting agenda, because there's a huge amount of stuff we have to spend money on right now. Equally on welfare, I think Labour's made a good start in cutting the welfare bill. I would go further. I would be more radical. I think there is huge scope for welfare reform, and that could save billions a year. But in the scheme of a global trade war, or these tariffs, which are going to cost us huge amounts of money, it's not going to touch the sides.
OK. Andy Williams, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Let's get the thoughts of the host of People Politics podcast, Paul Duddridge.
There you go, Paul. Good to see you this morning. I think you're in LA at the moment, aren't you? What do you make of what Andy had to say there, that this Trump is a disaster for the economy and for the American people?
You might be not too surprised that I take exactly the opposite view. I think it's actually saving the American economy and saving the American people. We are in an untenable position of a $37 trillion national debt with only a $28 trillion national GDP, annual GDP. And so we have a 50% almost extra debt. If we worked and didn't take any money at all for the next 12 months, we still would have a $9-10 trillion debt. We have to get that down. In 1970, if I get really boring on this, do tell me, 1970, 31% of jobs in the US market were manufacturing. Now it's 9%. And so offshoring manufacturing has had a cataclysmic effect on the middle class. What we call the working class in Britain, they call the middle class over here. And now you have the coastal elites, as they're called, the LA and New York, calling these states the Rust Belt. It's kind of hilarious that they're the Rust Belt because their machinery has been exported or been allowed to just become rusty and unused. And so we've exported our manufacturing jobs, our good-paying manufacturing jobs, over to China and over to Mexico, for instance, putting out of work entire towns, cities, and states. 50% of the cars in the US aren't made in the US at all. 94% of vehicles in Japan are made in Japan. 84%, I think, in Korea. Cars on the road are made in Korea. Only 50% in the United States. So Trump is doing exactly what he promised to do. He campaigned on tariffs being the most beautiful word in the English language, and promises made, promises kept. And there was a poll today, a Daily Mail poll, that had his approval rating going up to 53% from 49% in the last 4 days, because specifically of the, you can find other polls and you've got the protests, and there's a lot of the usual suspects who are very unhappy with him. But he is returning the manufacturing to the United States after decades of a systemic, statewide, international globalist agenda.
was a decision that they made positively, that American business made, to take trade out of the country because their labour costs were going to be cheaper. And in fact, the American population benefited from that because the goods that they were buying were therefore not too expensive. I mean, it was a positive decision that they made financially. What Trump is doing now, and I think people can perhaps agree that what he wants to do is to help the American economy, but the decision that he's made and the action that he's taken is not just affecting America, it is having a major effect globally on the rest of the world. And I think the rest of the world should be able to ask legitimately, you are the president of the United States, do what you want for America, but don't muck up the finances of the rest of the world while you're doing it.
Well, 100% agree with you. As America is 26% of the annual GDP of the world, it deserves to be treated with a bit more respect. So these tariffs, some of them are not actual tariffs. Some of the countries that Trump is claiming are reciprocal tariffs don't have tariffs on the United States, but they have restrictions, like in the UK and the EU. We can't take beef because it's hormones. We can't take chicken because it's chlorinated. We can't leave that to the consumer, apparently. We have to restrict the US farmer. Canada, for instance, I think it's like a 270% tariff on dairy exports. So you're absolutely right. If the consumer with zero tariffs could just decide whether or not to buy American products, that would be fantastic. But America subsidizing the rest of the world, being 26%, being the largest export market for the entire world, if it gets treated with that mutual respect, it will drop these tariffs. There are going to be prioritizing of manufacturing in the United States, but this is a huge, huge incentive for the world to stop disincentivizing their consumers from buying American exports. We aren't the ATM for the world any longer.
But the issue you've got with all of this, and I say if his approval rating's gone up 4 points, well, he's got some backing there. However, if you're looking at reindustrialising, that's going to take time and pain will continue to then. Or perhaps you get deals with the rest of the world and the tariffs get dropped and things go back to normal. But in that interim, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the American people. Will that support continue for Trump?
Well, I believe it will. There's a $1.2 trillion trade deficit that the United States has with the rest of the world. It basically spends $1.2 trillion more on other people's economies than it does on its own. It's got that headroom within its own economy. Even if we had to subsidize our own manufacturers in the interim, we could pick up that slack. Like I said, this could be easily rectified overnight by countries dropping their tariffs. China getting into its retaliation is probably very silly because we have a $300 billion trade deficit with China alone. So the idea, it's very difficult to hurt America. If you don't take its exports, it's very difficult to see what leverage places like the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is a pretty special case, actually. It's almost like we've almost got a trade balance. So I do think Keir Starmer's in a fantastic position, and maybe this is one of the reasons why Jaguar Land Rover has paused exports, because I think there might be a deal in the offing, because you actually have, the UK has been quite respectful and has got a balance of trade. The EU, China, between them, $500 billion worth of trade deficit. Now, they've played hardball over the years about accepting US exports. If they drop that, if they just said, OK, it's open season, we will accept your exports and we'll let the consumer decide, I think you might have a completely different complexion on this in a week.
OK. Paul, good to get your analysis. Thanks very much indeed.